Okay. Uh, can anybody let me know if this is actually working? Or am I the only viewer? It's entirely possible. I'll start recording this as well if I need to use it for later on. I can't tell if this is working, so I do need a little help out there. If anybody does join in, let me know in the comments in the chat. That would be great because I can't tell. Just getting things set up here because why would it be easy? It's never easy. All right. Okay, I do see stuff here. So awesome. So hey everybody, I will record this for a later time, so therefore I'm not necessarily worried if anybody's on here at the moment or not. But think of this as Soccer Coach KW recording a live video, and maybe I'll edit it after the fact. So hi, I'm here from MLS Next Fest here in Arizona, in Mesa, Arizona. And I've been out here for a few days because one of my sons is lucky enough to have play in MLS Next for the last 3 years. And so I've got some insight as to what this all is and what it's all about. It is definitely a whole different world. If, like myself, you mostly coach in volunteer status, town rec, AYSO, that sort of thing. Perhaps this is the furthest thing from your reality, and that is totally fine. But I think there's some things to be learned from it and some of the processes that go there. And I think it's also important to understand that there's a whole pyramid, a whole level. Like we know in international soccer, there are lots of pyramids. And in the US, we don't have promotion and relegation maybe yet. USL is working on that. Perhaps MLS will get on board. But in the rest of the world, if you win, you move up, or if you're better, you move up. And if you lose or worse, you go down. And that's just how it works. And there are multiple leagues in the pyramid. English Premier League, obviously, if you follow that on TV, you know that's the top level. And then there's the championship below that. And then there's League One and League Two, and it goes down multiple levels all the way to Sunday League, fun stuff. So, anyways, I'm here at MLS Next Fest. If you have any questions, if anybody does join in, that would be great. I'll answer as many questions as I can. But otherwise, really, what I want to do is I just want to talk about what all this is and why we are, what goes on with all this. I have to keep looking over here to my left and down because I only have my bifocal. So in order for me to see the computer screen, unfortunately, I do have to look down and, um, and deal with it that way. It's not the best situation, but it is what it is. I'm in a random Airbnb, lovely home, actually apartment attached to a home, and I've really enjoyed my time here. But what is this pyramid? So here's one of the images out there that talks about all the different levels, and you'll see at the very top, you'll see MLS Next, you'll see some other, it's an alphabet soup, let's put it that way. But at the top, We have MLS Next academies. So those are usually academies that are associated with an Next team, MLS team. So in New England, it's New England Revolution. They have four MLS Next academy teams. But then clubs in the states around us in New England also have teams that are affiliated with MLS Next. So there's already a tier system that in that system. And as you go down, you can see I could argue with some of the tiering that's in here. But basically, it goes all the way down to what most of us probably coach, which is town, local rec soccer, maybe town travel soccer, AYSO in different parts of the country, lots of things above us. And some of our kids play club, and you might wonder, well, where does that kid fit in? They would tend to fit in really at the bottom level of that pyramid in these local regional clubs. For us, it's the NESCL in New England that runs basically if a kid plays club and it isn't anything without any other letters, that's where they're playing. They usually play on Sundays, and away we go. I'm going to switch to a different pyramid that somebody made. It's a little clearer. You can see here, you've got also beyond youth soccer, you've got the MLS Next Pro and the USL 2. Those are semi pro, and those are leagues that both competing US soccer folks are creating to try and give a pathway into academy style. Not necessarily sure how well a lot of that's going, but that's what's going there. But again, you'll see MLS Next at the top, pro academies. Then you'll see MLS and ECNL. Now, what's important to note is for MLS, there are two levels, and same with ECNL. But there's a difference with the MLS. There's an MLS homegrown or the original MLS, and then there's MLS Academy, which used to be MLS 2, which on the Eastern Seaboard at least, they kind of took over the NAL, which was a replacement for the ECNL. Because up here in the Northeast, ECNL is not really a thing, at least the full national one, at least for a few years. But in many parts of the country, ECNL teams and MLS Next Academy teams are terms of play style and abilities for players are very similar. It's a few years ago, ECNL came out and said to the clubs, you can't have both. You have to pick. And in the Northeast, New England area, ECNL was never really had a foothold. So most of the clubs said, see you later. There is also an ECNL regional, just like there's an MLS2, and that's the next level down. But what's important to know about all these alphabets is MLS Homegrown, the original MLS, is the only one that is a year-round platform and does not allow players to play high school unless with very specific waivers because they want them in this academy system the whole year. There are teams that will allow players to play in high school. There are some accommodations for players who have basically been tuitioned into prep schools just to play soccer, and they'll get that waiver, but not everybody gets that. ECNL, that one of their big things is if you want to play high school soccer, you can, and then the season starts after that. Here in the Northeast, that's fall. In other parts of the country, it's winter or even spring, but that's how that works. So MLS Next, the homegrown, the top level, that is a full-time commitment. You play nothing else. You can play nothing else. It's very much they want you in that academy style system to focus on things. All the other leagues have that distinction of where you can play high school or not when you're in high school age. Before high school, obviously, a lot of the teams they run full year because you're not playing for a high school season. Oh, hello there. I got one person on. I love that. Thank you for the chat. How you doing, Michael? Michael, nice to see you. So I'm just gonna look at my notes again. I'm really sorry. I'm having to look down through my bifocals because I'm an old man. It is what it is, right? So it's kind of important to know where you are in that pyramid in terms of, how many layers up, because I think we've all dealt with it with parents who think their kids are going to be the next superstar and they're going to go off to high school soccer and they're going to be this super pro. and they don't even realize that above them is a whole multiple layer system of teams and players that are you just don't see in your regional rec team, travel team areas because they've opted out. My son was one of those. He played through second grade and realized that it just wasn't between his size and his ability, it wasn't really meeting his needs. And so he needed some higher level coaching and he wanted it, important factor, and away he went up there, right? So it's really about that perspective with parents to think, and coaches too, like, and players, frankly, to think, you think you may be good, but take a look at what's going on here. Now, all these pathways don't really start until you get to the second year of 9v9 is really where it starts to have that bifurcation, and then you go into your first year of 11v11. So that's about U12, U13 is when these step in, whereas prior to that, most programs are just regional based programs, although there are a few others, E64 and a few others that tout to be a different or a higher level. They may or may not be. It really is an alphabet soup out there. Um, the other piece I think is really important to understand is, depending where you are, high school soccer can be a goal for players, or it can just be something else. In my neck of the woods, high school soccer, it's exciting, but it's not necessarily good, except for a handful of schools in the state that I live in that really have a high level of play, but the majority of those players are coming from a club environment and playing in their high school. Whereas my town, for example, there are very few club players. The level of play is relatively low, and for certain players, it's just not something they're interested in. Other parts of the country, it's a different story, and everybody has their own path. But that's my story, and that's what I see in my neck of the woods. And so when we talk about college recruiting, gone are the days where high school soccer really means a lot, for better or worse, because now the best players are off at these MLS and ECNL showcases where there are lots of college coaches. Today I was out at the fields, and every time I go to one of these things, you see these people, usually men, sitting in low chairs with notepads on the corner watching. They're all college coaches. They all have a college hat on or a badge on from their university or college. Definitely MLS and ECNL showcases definitely get the eyeballs of the coaches because it's one place for them to go and hundreds of teams and thousands of players that they can take a look at all in one spot. So that's super helpful for them on that. Um, so I always want to let's excuse me again while I do this. Doing this live can be tricky. Um, so here's my sort of breakdown of the pyramids, right? MLS Next, the pro academies are the top level. Those are the ones that, are showing up with New England Revs or Orlando or whoever else, Columbus Crew. Those are the top ones. Those are pulling in the best of the best. They cherry pick kids off of the rest of the MLS Next clubs around them to come play for them. Then we have our homegrown, which is that full year one. And again, in some parts of the country, in some parts areas, that ECNL National has that. I've been lucky enough to see that for my son. He played multiple years in both, went from ECNL National to MLS. Then you have the MLS2 and the ECNLR or regional programs. And I will say that in that level of play, that's a pretty big drop down. And we'll take a look at why. And then we go into some of these E64 NPL, you get EDP and some other regional leagues. Um, then you get to where most kids who quote unquote play club are. In my neck of the woods, it's NESCL. But basically, usually they're playing on a Sunday so they can play for their town teams. Then you have town travel, which is what I deal with primarily. And then we have rec. So that's my pyramid. But what I want to talk about is really kind of why these kids, when they're in these programs, how good they really are and why. And a lot of it has to do with kind of the practice multiplier of how much time they spend. So if we take a look at this, this this schedule is my son's current MLS Next homegrown schedule, and it has this multiplier because when we look at the next slide, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But basically, he's got 4 nights a week. He's got Wednesday off. He's got a Monday and a Friday 90-minute session session, they're either tactical because they're before a game, or they're tactical / recovery because they've played over the weekend. Then Tuesdays and Thursdays, he's got a double session. One 90-minute session is either classwork or film review, or a little strength and conditioning, and then they do field work. And then on Thursday, it's strength and conditioning for 90 minutes, and then 90 minutes of heavy field work as well, scrimmage, play, etc., etc. So now, when we break that down, right? There are other places like ECNL tends to be, at least in my neck of the woods, they tend to be 3 nights a week, two team-based ones and one technical practice. And then for town and club, it's 2 nights a week, 90 minutes for us. And some places they only get an hour, and maybe it's only one night. So you can see that. And when we look at the next slide, it's this cumulative effect that builds up over the years that really starts to separate these kids. Now, yes, these kids are committed. These are kids who do more on the outside. They practice on their own. They're the ones always out back with the ball. They're the ones doing extra gym sessions. They're eating right. It really, once they get into U15, U16, U17, these players are real specimens, a lot of them. Big boys, to say the least. I don't have any experience on the higher end of girls side of things, but it is similar to Girls Academy. But I can only speak to what I know, right? So you think about top tier MLS Next, right? They usually run a 10-month season, give or take, with a little bit of time off in December. And so they're running about 40 weeks. We assume 4 weeks per month. And with my kids' current schedule at 9 hours a week, that's 360 hours of practice. And the year before, they didn't do those double sessions. So even then, that's 240 hours of practice through a season. Compare that now to a player who's in the next level down that's now practicing just 1 day less, 3 days a week instead of four. And you can see usually those schedules are a little bit shorter because the MLS teams seem to have a really true preseason. But I gave you both calculations. You got 162 and 180. So 180 on the high end to 240 on the low end for an MLS Next kid who's practicing 4 days a week. Now multiply that over multiple years, and you can see that that skill gap, that time on the ball, we talk about as youth coaches all the time, how much time on the ball do we have our players versus doing things that they're not engaged with the ball. Even taking away the gym sessions and film time, we're now talking about 240 hours a week versus at best 180 hours a week. Now you come down to like a town travel type program like I am with 2 days a week, and it's a little bit shorter. Now we're talking about 72 hours a year. That's a huge gap, right? And if you got 1 hour a week, like you're really down to a little bit. And then add in game time, right? MLS Next players that are usually playing one, sometimes 2 games a weekend, but they try to do one. Whereas at least when we were at ECNL, they tend to batch up games 2 per weekend. So they were playing two 75 to 90-minute games in a weekend. So that second game was tough for everybody because there was no recovery on there. But they're playing a longer season with more practice time. And as you multiply that factor, what you see is the kids' levels just jump and jump and jump and jump. Now, what's interesting, I'll put up some game footage here. This is just a random team that was standing next to me while I was waiting for my son's team to kick off. And what you can see here is, you might look at it and go, wow, it looks kind of messy, etc., etc. Remember, both of these teams are at the same level. The thing that I'll say is that it's really important, I think, to go and watch one of these games or practices just to see the speed in person. I know that some of my players, parents, and kids have come to watch my son play, and the first thing is, I can't believe how fast everybody is, how strong they are on the ball, and how physical the game is. Big boys running very hard, big collisions, etc., etc. But the skill that you see here, right, the patience with the ball, the comfortableness with the ball, that doesn't come from playing 2 times a week. These are kids, these are U17s in this trip, because that's who was playing today. It takes years and years and years to get to the level where these kids want to play that. And when you really see it is when you see an MLS team and an MLS Next team and an MLS Next 2 team, or an ECNL National versus an ECNL Regional. The step up is usually huge. My son's club, the MLS 2 and home grade, they practice at the same time next to each other, and you just look from one side of the field, and it's night and day. The level of the kids, it's like high school in the fall, and now come to this, and they're practicing 4 nights a week versus the kids who have been doing it for years, and just at a different level. It is remarkable, and if they ever scrimmage, it's kind of a bloodbath. When two MLS Next teams play against each other, yes, there are better and worse teams, but it's hard to not sometimes necessarily go, oh, that's so much better than what I'm used to, until you're standing there and you realize how fast with your own eyeballs. It's hard with just this video going on, really to note how quick it is, but like it's quick. I've also refereed some ECNL stuff, and it's like being in a plane compared to doing regional games and town games because everything moves so fast. The closer you can get to the action, the faster you realize what's going on there. So I'm just popping over here. Where would a league premier be in the pyramid? It's tough to say because again, this country, our US is so big that with the alphabet soup, it's hard to know where that fits in. I think what you need to look at is where do kids come from and where do they go when they leave? You know, you look at the best kids and where are they going up and where, and the kids who drop down a level, where are they dropping out of? That probably is a good indication of either there's a great coach somewhere else, because again, it's really about the coach, finding a good coach, but also you can find whether or not the league moves up and down. Somebody else asked me a question um, about the camaraderie. And I'll tell you, like at MLS Next Fest, it's unless you're from the same club, these teams do not support each other. They don't care about anybody else. It's about them and them only. It's a brutal schedule. They've flown in from all over the country. This facility that we're at, just for the U17s and the U19s, and they don't play on the same days here, except for one that there are 24 fields in one area contiguous all together. And they're playing from 8:45 in the morning until into the evening with the lights on, running multiple games. There's probably about 450 teams here, give or take. And with the new MLS 2, now those teams are eligible to come. And so there's two or three other facilities in the area around Phoenix where they're hosting their games. So this is a massive, massive operation. These teams come in. I'll say on the ECNL side, at least my experience, not all the teams would go to these fests because they were based on playoffs. Whereas for this, any team can come. Some in the spring, they do actually a playoff and a showcase and they separate them. But for the fest, anybody can come. And same for the one that happens in the summer. It is anybody, any team can come who's willing to come. And most do because of the exposure for their kids. Because as kids are being recruited nowadays, and I'm in the process now. It's unbelievable. It's more about a marketing effort from you and your kid reaching out to coaches saying, hey, coach, here's my GPA, here's my highlight video. I'm going to be playing here, I'm going to be playing here. It's again, it's so easy for these coaches to fly to one place and be able to see 100 kids over a week's period in person play and then decide, hey, why don't you come out to one of our camps versus having to come and stop by individual games all over the place. Now they're able to recruit, a college from Washington State can recruit a kid from Massachusetts or New Jersey because they're here versus that coach having to fly across the state. So that's kind of where that comes from. How much work is done on throw-ins or using out of bounds for territory play, basically dead balls. Even at the MLS next level, they don't do a ton with throw-ins, or they'll do dead ball stuff. They certainly will work a little bit on corners, routines and stuff like that. Some teams and coaches do more, some do less, but they tend to have a little bit of focus. But again, the players that are on all these teams, these are all some of the best players. They might not all be the smartest players, but on the field are smart players who can help direct. And so that general level compared to what we're used to as town or even low level club coaches of just explaining the game, they know it inside and out. These are the kids who not only watch Premier League on the side, they have favorite teams, they have side bets going with their teammates, they know world soccer inside and out. And then when they go out and play, they have all that context. They know how the game is supposed to be played, they know all the tricks, they know when to flop, they know when to do all those things. It's real soccer by the time you get to U15, U16, U17. It can be quite an entertaining game. It can also be quite a sloppy game because they're kids, they're learning. And again, there are good teams and bad teams, etc., etc. But in general, all the players are pretty decent. I will say this. I made this post a while ago on a subreddit for youth soccer. And here's the dirty truth for real, though, here is that even on these teams, even the MLS Academy teams, those teams ultimately exist for one or two, three players on the team, and the rest of the players around them are usually supporting pieces to work the development of these couple of kids. It's a sad reality, but for example, on my kids' team, there's two players that are the players, right? And everybody else are good players, but these two players have the chance to do much more. No guarantees, obviously. There are obvious players who are in these teams are already in the 1%, but now we're talking about kids who are have that chance to be in the 1/5 of a percent or 1/2 of a percent type of deal. And it's a long shot, but that's kind of how they kind of run. The MLS academies, a lot of people sometimes go, "Oh, wow, one of the non-academy teams has beat them." MLS academies, most of the time, they're not building a team. They're building a collection of the best players, hoping that one or two or three of them pan out. So they're not looking to sit there and go, I need four center backs, I need eight midfielders, and I need four strikers, and I need three keepers. They may have a team where they have two natural center backs, 11 midfielders, and a striker, because those are the best 18 kids available in that age group in the area. And when they play games, players are being played out of position all the time. And some of the better MLS Next teams also work that philosophy. But for the most part, you tend to see teams that are constructed to have a good group of, 4 to 5 center backs for depth, good group of 5 or 6 midfielders, 2 to 3 strikers, 2 or 3 goalies, so that with injuries and everything else, it goes along. Uh, I will say, just as an aside, go if you go to MLS's website and you go and look for MLS Next and you look at the operating conditions, you'll see what sort of barrier to entry it is for clubs to get in. It's not impossible, but looking at the fee structure and the fine structure to make sure that they do the right things for the kids, it's no joke. Like some of the fines start at $5,000 per incident and go up from there. So it's really kind of interesting. Oh, let's see. Yeah, so I love that, Mike, about good for parents to understand and volunteer coaches who like to yell at the kids in rec soccer. 100%. My son played a season of rec soccer because he had a friend who wanted to play soccer but was reluctant. So he came and played in town. And this is when he had been playing club for a few years. And like the son was on the ball. I remember because I was refereeing in this game. It was kind of funny, and this dad is just screaming at this kid, don't let that kid dance with the ball. And it was kind of amusing because the levels of difference are huge, and I don't think parents always understand that. My kid literally could have held this ball for an hour from this kid just because the level of difference is so different. And eventually the other parents started to laugh at the guy and was like, "Shut up, pal!" Right? I worked with somebody whose kid like set a freshman scoring record, and like, I don't understand why your kid doesn't play soccer, high school soccer. It can't be that good if doing all those things. And it's like, you don't understand, like, because you set a scoring record as a freshman because you're the fastest player on that field means nothing, because when you come to these club teams, especially when you get to MLS and ECNL, every kid is fast, every kid is way better with foot skills. That high school team would most of the time lose against a team made up of ninth or 10th graders that play at that level because they're all that good. It's really hard, I think, for some people to accept and understand how many levels to this game there are and how sometimes far away they are from the thing they think they're doing. Kid's fantastic in town travel and thinks they're going to be a starter in varsity. And if your high school has a whole bunch of kids that play club on the side and then just play high school, he's not getting a sniff even to JV a lot of times. It's just a different world. So, anyways, that's kind of all I had for today. I was alone and bored, and I'll use this as a video feeder. Let me just see if there are any. All the chat messages are in here. Yeah, not a lot. Again, this isn't something I necessarily would do. Um, and I wasn't expecting to have a ton of people, but I'll leave it up on the channel just because it's another video and maybe people will find it useful. If you did find it useful, remember, like and subscribe. If you find this after the fact and you're interested in more about this, um, definitely take a look. Let me just check my notes to make sure I hit everything I was looking to go for. Yeah, yeah, I have. So, that's it from Arizona. Half an hour seems like plenty of time for me to ramble on in an empty B&B by myself. I'm gonna go find some dinner. I had a bagel earlier. That's the bummer of traveling. My son, I, I will say this for my son's club. They do club travel, team travel, so the team goes everywhere together, et cetera, et cetera. Not all teams do that. A lot of times, parents are responsible for bringing them. So I'm one of three parents here watching the team play, whereas other teams, the sideline's full. It has its pluses and minuses. I like that the team travels and stays together. I miss my kid. I wish he was hanging out with me. But, uh, when they do this sort of team travel, anything over a couple hours, they either rent a bus or we pay a little extra and ship off. And away you go. So, anyways, I hope that you found this useful. Um, Thanks for those who watched, and until next time, I hope to see you guys out in the fields. Bye bye.